In this video, I'd like to set up a Visual Studio Code environment for SQLAlchemy, but I'm also going to set it up because in the long run, I wanted to also have Flask and WTForms. I will set it up for that as well. It is already set up for Python, so you can see I have a hello world Python sort of running. So I already have the extension for Python. Okay. Now I'm going to install these WTForms and Flask and SQLAlchemy within a virtual environment. So I will first set up the virtual environment. That is, I'm down in a terminal. If you don't have a terminal, you can get a terminal by clicking on terminal. My terminal is down here. I've increased the font size. That's the only thing I've really done with my terminal here. And it's this command Python -m venv. So then the second one is that I'm naming my venv, that giving it the name venv, which is kind of standard. And that's going to run for a while and set some things up for me. It has it's not quite done running, but you can see it's starting over here under the Explorer to establish a folder venv that will be the folder I'm in for or running. Let's sort of extend that. So we're going to have to run a file that is in the scripts folder there. And the one we're going to run is a PowerShell command. So one of the next things I want to do is to allow myself to run a PowerShell script. So that is in here. It's finally finished. There in scripts, I'm going to run an activate command. I'm going to probably run the PowerShell one. And so I want to give myself permissions to run PowerShell scripts. So I'm going to search for PowerShell. I like the ISE. I'm going to right click and run it as administrator. And then I need to set the execution policy. So I'm not going to write it. I set up the ISE, which seems to suggest I'm going to write a script, but I'm not. I'm just going to write it as a command. But it will give me some sort of help, sort of start recognizing the commands. So I want to set execution policy. There it is. And I don't have permissions to do this sort of globally, so I have to set a scope. And I'm setting the scope to me as the current user. And the setting I want is RemoteSigned. And then I'm entering that, and I will say here, yes to all. And so now I can go back to Visual Studio Code and run. I want to move. I was in the venv, and but I'm not in my terminal's not there. That was created by my command, but I'd like to move into it. So that is the cd change directory command, venv. Now I'm in the venv, and then and that's where I'd like to stay, but the script I'd like to run is in scripts. So I'm going to start with scripts and then activate. And that has activated my script. And here you can see it's preceded by this venv in parentheses. So I have an activated virtual environment. And this is going to allow me to set up a small section on my computer where I have these things installed, but not install it more globally. So one thing I want to install first is Flask. Pip install Flask. And then I will install WTForms. So in the long run, I'm going to do SQLAlchemy. So I'm going to start off making a database. And in the longer run, not within this video, I'm going to be making interfaces to that database. So that's why the Flask and the WTForms. So that was Flask I just did. Now let's do Flask WTF. And that gives us some nice forms to work with. I didn't spell Flask correctly at all. It's better, I think. There we go. So now I have Flask. Then normally I would test Flask. I'm going to trust it and get on with the SQLAlchemy. So that is my third pip install. And I want SQLAlchemy. There we go. And then I will just sort of test that install and then be done. It's just the installation is the purpose of this video. I will be using it, the SQLAlchemy environment sort of or library in different videos. So this is just about installation. But down here on my command line, I'm going to move into a Python environment. Within that, I have not, within that environment, now that I've installed SQLAlchemy, I can import it. And you got to watch sort of what is capital letters and what is small letters, especially when working with commands. So this is SQLAlchemy, all small letters. I'm importing it. And then I am just going to check its version, SQLAlchemy dot double underscore dunder version double underscore, and I have 2.0.22. So it knows the version that suggests it's successfully installed. I want to get out of this Python environment. That's exit. And that's all I wanted to show you, sort of setting up the environment, sort of setting up the virtual environment, and then installing Flask, which we really didn't test, and WTForms, again, we didn't really test, and the SQLAlchemy, and all we tested it as far as to see that we could get a version number, then it was indeed installed. That's all for this one. Thanks for your attention.